Hi, I'm Meshal Malik and you're watching Indus Special. Result day for O and A-level students this year was very different to how it usually is. Not just because it came during a pandemic, but also because for many students and teachers, the grades awarded were much lower than their expectations. Now, O and A-level qualifications are awarded by examination bodies within the United Kingdom, but many students across the world take these exams. Just to understand how many students give these exams, Cambridge Assessment International Education, one of the biggest awarding bodies for O and A-level certification, states on its site that Cambridge O-level is taught in over 50 countries. Cambridge International AS and A-levels are taken in over 130 countries, with more than 575,000 subject entries each year. So when an algorithm was used to calculate grades this year because of exams being cancelled, thousands and thousands of students saw their results downgraded. And for A-level students, this meant that they will lose out on their university placements. Let's discuss this further. Join us for the conversation is Ms. Huma Pervaiz, who's an educationalist and coordinator of A-Level Beacon House Newlands, one of the many branches of the Beacon House network operating in South Asia. She joins us from Lahore. Thank you so much, Ms. Pervaiz, for joining us and welcome to the show. Now, let's first start with what happened on result day. How was it different compared to the other past years?
So I will just start with just telling our audience that Cambridge International is an external assessment and we are considered one of their largest consumers. And sadly, this year was a huge disappointment for all of our O-levels and A-level students. So how it was different? Because it was evidence-based. There was no actual external examination. So O-levels, as we all know, that there is like once in the year 13, you appear for the entire subject, or some schools have the option that you appear in certain subjects like Urdu or Pak Studies or Islamiyat, which are additional for our country. International passport holders, even residing in Pakistan, are exempted. So it meant that the ones who are appearing for O-levels, let's talk about O-levels first. So it meant that their evidence had to be based on the past 3 years. And that, of course, included all the internal examinations. So, which is sadly that, that not in many schools, students don't take mocks or even half-yearlies or term-end papers that seriously. This is like a culture which is not only in Pakistan, it's there in all the other countries, including UK as well. And it was said by Cambridge that usually there is a margin of 2 to 2.5 months after their mocks. And it was just right on 20th. Schools in UK were closed, and so was ours were just closed a few days earlier. UK closed their schools and universities on 20th. So it was an international thing. So it meant that all the exams, earlier they just thought, they kind of miscalculated the fact that there could be a possibility that they can just appear in November. Most of our students wanted to, but they were discouraged by that. And so they ended up, we were given guidelines which were clear yet unclear, because that meant we have to utilize all the data, which varies from school to school. It's not, the difficulty level is not same. It varies highly. And so it was totally on the internal assessment. And of course, for A-levels, they would keep the AS results. AS is not there in many schools, but I've seen this one thing which is positive, that if a child had a great AS result, Cambridge has taken that into consideration. So that meant that if you took last year's A1 examination seriously, you really didn't have to worry about much.
Ms. Pervaiz, now from what you've told me, there's a couple of questions that come up. One of them, and I'll start with this one, is when you say it was unclear and clear because of the guidelines that were given to you, how you would come up with predicted grades for your students and pass those on. What was the difficulty in doing that? Because every year teachers do give predicted grades, but given this situation, given the pandemic, given so much uncertainty, what was different about calculating the predicted grades this time around?
So if you're talking with reference with admissions in foreign universities, the predicted grades are given, but they're given by December, because most of universities have their deadlines, which varies. For certain universities, it's different. For America, it's different. So predicted grades are given, but they're given to the universities. And what happens, all our students that plan to study in American universities and local universities like LAMS and other national universities as well, so they share these predicted grades. And on behalf of that, they receive a conditional offer.
Right, Ms. Pervaiz, when talking about giving these predicted grades, I want to talk about how the universities respond to it. But before that, I just want to take a step back and discuss exactly how teachers, when they're coming up with assigning these predicted grades, giving students these predicted grades, what considerations go into them?
Let's talk about A-levels predicted grades first. Because that is kind of simpler, and you give predicted grades for A-levels mostly. So what happens is this: they keep their last year's performance, because if you're giving them for A2, you keep A1's performance in mind. You keep the first assessment, which is right there in October in many schools, and then you have the half-yearlies. They keep class assessments. Most of the class assessments at this stage are graded. So it's basically your first term or your half-yearly exams result, which is kept in mind. And if you're applying for an early action or you're applying to Cambridge or Oxford, you need to do a bit of extra work. So your A-levels, A1's result matters quite a bit, whether it's internal or external. But of course, the first exam, which is done in October, and the second exam, which happens in December. But then I'm going to reiterate that that it's not universal in all schools. It's not simple. It's not same. And the difficulty level varies from each school to each. Right. So it can vary highly. So if you cannot really base your judgment, and you cannot compare half-yearly or mock exams of one school with another.
Right. Did Cambridge communicate, or the British Council, which is examining these other the bodies that take these exams within Pakistan, did they communicate what type of leniencies would be taken given the situation? Did they communicate that standard of marking students or rewarding grades to them would be different compared to other years? Did they indicate that in any way?
Indicated, because it was not assessment based. It is evidence based. So this is like the major difference. But of course, it was shared that they would keep the unprecedented and the kind of emergency situation we are in, and they will keep all these factors in mind. The only thing I think what happened, as you just mentioned, that it was done all through the algorithm. So this is like, and the flashcard, which is just playing now, that the algorithm doesn't know them. So what happened was this: if a certain school is having 5% U grades in one given year and 4% previous year, the algorithm would actually give the same percentage or the mean to this present year as well. So which could not happen, because U grade is usually given when the paper is completely empty, which is ungraded, when the child has not tried anything. On the other hand, we gave Cambridge evidence. So this is what my biggest qualm about U grades is, that it shouldn't have been there, because the child must have done something throughout the year or the 2 years that he has been studying. He couldn't be giving out empty papers. And honestly, schools wouldn't be sharing that a child has done nothing throughout 2 years. It backfires to their repute. So this is something which is most questionable at the moment.
Right.
And the governing body in our country is IBCC, which should be dealing with the Cambridge International at the moment.
Right. Now let's see what exactly happened in your experience with the students. When they got their results, what was the mood and atmosphere like for majority of the students then, and the teachers, the individuals you communicated within the school?
I'll tell you, the thing is that the ones who did AS levels wonderfully, they didn't really have to worry much, because their AS result was there as an evidence. And of course, Cambridge would not deny its own grades. So for instance, a child who had 2 A's and 2 B's last year was more or less given the same result. So the ones who took AS level a little less seriously, because they always have a chance to appear in the aggregate or the complete exam, and a lot of them wanted to, so they were in a fix. And so it's a mixed bag, but A1's result is more disappointing as compared to A2's result.
Right, so when wasn't any history of what the grades awarded in the previous year were, there was more disappointment in that case. Now, how important are these grades when we talk about university admissions? Because for A-level students, that is what the main crisis is about, that their university admissions are being put on hold or being canceled altogether. Now, when you interact with the students, what are their main fears?
Okay, so we are discussing about the students that, okay, so we'll go, I'll talk about the local universities first, and then we have the international universities. So the local universities, their equivalence is always a little too technical, and let's be honest, they don't really favor the A-level students. So what I would suggest and what I would request, and what our school insists other schools would request, is for them to have a linear view, and which is done as per my knowledge, because I've seen that UET and FC College Lahore, they have given them this, if a child has not met the conditions, they've given them this provisional admission, saying that they appear in October-November exam and have their result by January. UET went an extra mile, and they said that if they cannot pass, their fee would be refunded. So this is something, this is like the latest development. So this is something which other universities, local universities can do as well. And ideally, it should be lenient for the next 2 years, but at least for this year, it should be much lenient.
Right, and for those students who have had and secured admissions abroad, what is their main gripe right now? What are they facing?
So UCAS is the portal that we use for admissions in UK. Most of our admissions are done through UCAS. They are considering certain things. Our counselors are in constant touch with them. Universities are coming up with lenient view. And for US, the SAT score matters the most. Unless and until it's a very drastic result, I think they have a silver lining. They can still join or get this session deferred. But the general trend is this: a lot of students would not want to go abroad this year, because half of the universities are not even asking international students to come. And the other half which are asking, of course, they would be lenient, and they would be reconsidering certain things. But the basic and, the foremost thing which should be on our minds is how to deal with the entire crisis on the national level. So this is something which is controllable and which we can always, try to communicate through the forums and see how it goes.
Right.
But as I just told you, they are considering it. And I think tomorrow, let's see, what does Cambridge International have to say?
Yes, Cambridge International said that they will release an updated statement tomorrow regarding the situation and give updated guidelines. But I also want to introduce another guest who's joined us, Mr. Murad Raas, who's the Education Minister in Punjab. He joins us from Lahore. Thank you so much, Mr. Raas, for joining us and taking out the time to talk to us. Now, when we're talking about what happened this year on Result Day and how widespread this problem was, you being the Minister for Punjab, how many complaints and how many complaints from all over Punjab did you get regarding this case? How many schools contacted you? How many students contacted you for you to notice that this was, in fact, a huge problem?
Thousands of people have come forward, students have come forward, and their parents at the same time. It is a huge problem right now as we speak. I'm hoping they can come up, because I'm in touch with Uzma, the country director for Cambridge in Pakistan. And I'm hoping that she would come up with, and Cambridge would come up with something good by tomorrow, because this is an extraordinary year. When there are extraordinary conditions, you have to make extraordinary decisions like we have made in our schooling system. So if Cambridge cannot make extraordinary decisions, then, I mean, people are going to be completely in protest and other things. I mean, they'll go to court, they'll go everywhere. I mean, everybody's sitting down right now calmly to see what Cambridge has to offer tomorrow. So, I mean, I'm in the same place right now as the students, that we're waiting to see tomorrow, because hopefully everything is favorable, what comes tomorrow, and we can resolve this in a decent manner and move forward with this. Because of COVID, it has been a very, very difficult situation for everyone. So, like I was told, because I suggested that let's give the students the grades that the schools have recommended. They said, oh, the percentage of A grade students will go up by 10%. They always used to be like 10%. Now it'll be 20% if we do that. So I said, what is the big deal? These are extraordinary conditions. If 1 year, because of such a big catastrophe of COVID-19, 1 year the results are have gone different than every year else, what difference does that make? No difference.
Right.
So,
it definitely. Sorry to interject here, Mr. Raas, but as you say that it will make a huge difference, and given the extraordinary circumstances, examination bodies should show more leniency in this. But since this, of course, is an issue, a global issue, and many countries are putting forth their own demands, putting forth what their own recommendations should be in this case. What are the recommendations that you've put out, and also other provincial governments have put out? What is the federal government doing for this? What's happening in trying to point out the list of demands to the examination boards?
Not put any demands on Cambridge right now, unless we see what they're doing first. We have asked them to bring a cure to a problem that we have right now. Why has this happened? Tell us why. Tell us what you're doing. Once they come up with the resolution that this is what they think should be done, then we'll tell them exactly that how things, what we need them to do. Because my request to them was that fix the problem. I cannot fix that problem for you. You have to fix this problem. And I think the biggest issue that we have right now is we don't have a regulatory body on top of this board of Cambridge. Why has nobody ever looked at it? Why has nobody ever done this? I'm shocked. I think that's the first thing we're going to do, is make a body on top of that for regulations and things like that to be run in this country. I mean, we're going to make it for sure in Punjab. Hopefully, I mean, all other provinces will follow that. And we will make this regulatory body that needs to govern what's going on with Cambridge. So let's see what they come up with tomorrow, and then we'll go from there. And because it is a big issue, I mean, it is just not, there are it's a multiple-pronged issue. Number one, the children, obviously the grades are being hurt, and they cannot get admissions where they chose or they had made a choice at that time that that's what they want to do. Second of all, it's a huge financial burden. At the same time, this is not cheap. I mean, for O levels, it starts at about 16,000 rupees. And then at A levels, it starts at 19,000 rupees. And that's where they start at. So, I mean, it is a multiple-pronged issue.
Right.
So, in less than 24 hours, we'll hopefully know, inshallah, that what is going on.
Right, Mr. Raas, as you pointed out, that one of the main issues is university admissions during this time. Many students who had previously secured a place in universities abroad and local based on conditional offers now don't have those anymore because of the results that came out. So while we're waiting for Cambridge to give out a statement, there is also a real loss happening at the same time, which is students losing out on their admissions. Now, when we talk about local universities, what is the government doing in order to communicate what has happened right now and tell them to be a little more lenient? Because there are reports coming in that they're still as strict as they were before with their admission policies, at least some universities.
Obviously, we're going to contact all the local universities because they fall into our realm, and we're going to deal with them right away. The key is what they come up with tomorrow, because then it gives us a line of action what we need to do. Because when I talked to them on Friday, because this happened like on Wednesday, I think, and we did our homework and everything, and I called them Friday. And Friday, they asked me for 2 to 3 days, and that's exactly what they have taken. 3 days is Monday, Tuesday, today is the third day. And we'll find out tomorrow what line of action they're going to take. And according to that, we'll take our line of action.
And what kind of line of action are you hoping to take if what you've said, that predicted grades should be the ones that are considered, something that's happened in Scotland recently, that's not taken? What are the means of actions you are willing to take in that case?
That right now. So, but there are things that we have already discussed here, and we'll let you know shortly.
Right.
Hopefully within the next 48 hours.
Right. So a lot depends on the statement that is released tomorrow by the Cambridge Assessment Board and what they say they're going to do about these grades that are given. Thank you so much, Mr. Murad Raas, for joining us from Lahore. We're going to go for a short break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation. Stay with us. Welcome back to the show as we continue our conversation regarding what happened on Result Day this year for the thousands and thousands of students across the world who were getting their O and A-level certificates. What we know is that after school submitted their predicted grades and put each student for each subject in ranks, the examination bodies then applied a standardized process, an algorithm which, according to reports, has downgraded 40% of the results. We now talk about how widespread the impact has been and what really the way forward is for educational institutions and students. Joining us for this conversation is Huma, who's an educationalist and coordinator of A-Level Beacon House Newlands, one of the many branches of the Beacon House network, which is present across South Asia. Also joining us now is Ms. Saima Asghar Riaz, who has an extensive teaching and teacher training experience. She is also the CEO of Solutions to Enhance Professional Skills and has been working with UK higher education admissions for about 22 years to support students through guidance and counseling. She joins us from Dubai. Thank you both for joining us and welcome to the show. Ms. Riaz, now I'm going to begin with you. In our previous segment, we talked about what exactly went wrong and what the conundrum is. Basically, for those who gave A-levels exams this year, it's about their university placements. Now, let's talk about exactly what university admissions are like for those who give A-levels and how much of their admission is based on their results. Give us some insight into that.
Well, obviously, those who give A-levels, there's sort of two types of students. There, a minority of students are those who are going abroad. And overseas universities have actually been pretty flexible, especially considering the changes that the UK government has been making going back and forth. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but just today, IB, International Baccalaureate, revised their grades. And it was a shocker to universities because they had already taken their decisions. And IB revised their grades, and a lot of students got their grades improved by default because they changed the criteria on which they were marking. So universities are trying to be flexible and as adaptive as possible. The majority of the students, however, who appear for the Cambridge exam in Pakistan, because IB is a very small segment, it's primarily Cambridge or Edexcel, they go to local universities. And I heard the Honourable Minister in the previous segment where he said that they were waiting for Cambridge's statement tomorrow and then they would instruct local universities accordingly. And I do hope that I would have hoped that local universities had already been instructed to be flexible because, yes, it's been a fiasco, it's been it's terrible, but we have to consider the circumstances, and the whole year has been terrible. So it's not only the Cambridge exams or just not only results. I think universities will no matter what decision Cambridge takes, universities will have to be adaptable, and they will have to be flexible. Because even if the results are revised, even if there are appeals, they will not be reflective of students' exam performance. We also know that as per statistics shared by Cambridge for worldwide, as you said, results have been sort of up 40% below what were expected. But Cambridge has also, I read somewhere, said that if they had given the results that schools have predicted, the overall result this year would have been 35% higher than it has been historically in previous years.
Right, Ms. Riaz, according to that statement, that percent increase in grades was only for one segment of those who got an A grade, and that too is being linked a lot to how the grades were rewarded according to school setups, whether there were independent bodies and academies giving them or proper schools giving them. That's more that we need to learn about. But Ms. Saima, Asghar, Riaz, I want to take the conversation and move it towards a more general direction about considering a student's profile when they're applying to a university. We hear a lot about how A-levels and O-levels are the make or break component of those admissions. Should universities, now given how we're seeing the fault lines in all these systems, should they start taking a more holistic approach?
Absolutely, and that has been my contention ever since the announcement was made that that exams would be cancelled, and parents and students were panicking. And I am constantly, wherever I can, I am appealing to schools to be more supportive of students. I know of schools that have, unfortunately, when they were sending their forecasted grades, they did not take into account, as per their routine policy. If the school, for example, was not sending forward a revised AS level grade, in previous years, they continued to do that this year with the result that they sent old AS level grades, and students got an even lower result, despite having improved in a retake. So my appeal to schools primarily is, please be flexible. Please look at each student on an individual merit and put aside your policies for this year. And for the subsequent 2 years as well, because we will see that students who have received lower O levels or higher O levels than they deserve, perhaps,
right,
will be predicted grades based on these results. So schools will have to be flexible in their policies, not only for this year's admissions, but also for the predicted results that they give to universities next year, because these results are not truly reflective of each student's potential or lack of it thereof.
Right.
So therefore, contextual offers need to be made, and schools need to support students in getting those contextual offers.
Ms. Huma, we're going to take this question to you and talk about this support that needs to be given to students. And I don't want to just make this conversation about what's happening right now, which is, of course, an extraordinary situation, but even other years around, when we talk about support being given, about schools needing to be more flexible with their grades, how difficult is that to do when, at the end of the day, the final result is determined by an external board?
Okay, that's a very difficult question. So schools have to be flexible about the approach, but they don't really have to be flexible about the grading thing, right? And the dilemma that our students are in at the moment when it comes to the universities in UK and in America is this, that they want to have the quality of students which they were having last year or before that. And when they give you a conditional offer, they of course look through your entire portfolio. It's just not 1 year's work. They want to know whatever co-curriculars you have participated in, whatever sports you have played in, how many standardized tests you have been participating in. So the thing is that, yes, we have to be lenient towards certain things, but we have to standardize certain other things as well. And if we have been so idealistic or so strict about our internal grading systems, and maybe our history was immaculate of sending predicted grades, Cambridge might not have done this to us. But again, what I suggest to our education minister is this, that we should actually request them to give us the right of individual appeals. So rather than just asking one solution for everybody, we should actually be asking that all our appeals should be listened to without any fee, without any additional fee, because there is an additional fee for getting your papers rechecked or competence rechecked. So this is something which we can ask them to agree to. And as for local universities, I told you the two universities that I know of, FC College and UET, they are making certain conditions lenient for our students. And I believe other schools will.
Right.
And so let's see how it pans out.
Right. Ms. Pervaiz mentioned something that universities take into account the entire portfolio of a student, their entire performance, whether it's regarding extracurricular activities or their academic results. Ms. Riaz, when we talk about this portfolio being presented, how much weight do you think, because you've dealt with this, you've dealt with counseling children, you've dealt with leading them to better universities, you've helped young individuals in maneuvering through all of that. How much weight do foreign universities, especially to international students, do they give to other extracurricular activities?
In the UK, not much. It's about 20% of the overall profile. So we guide students when we tell them about their UCAS statements. We specifically advise them to focus more on academics and tell them to do an 80-20 mix in their university essays. In the US, it's different. In the US, they look at it in a much more sort of holistic way, and they give they may be less weightage to grades because they are looking at the SATs. They are looking at other standardized tests rather than just the school exams. Whereas the UK is looking at academic performance as a key marker or key indicator of the student's performance, but they do look at the predicted grades very carefully, as well as the teacher's reference, and there they need to see that the student is well-rounded through the teacher's reference, as well as that 20% in the personal statement that students have to put in. So it is important. They don't want nerds who can get brilliant A stars, but not really have other skills. So they want to see evidence of skills. But at the end of the day, it is the grades. The students are not admitted based on poor grades but extracurricular activities.
Right. Ms. Riaz, when we're talking about what the way forward is after the situation, we're hoping that, as Ms. Pervaiz pointed out, that not only government appeals are heard, but individual appeals are also heard. But we also know that A-levels is given almost across 130 countries. So while that is a hope and an aspiration, that might not exactly happen. But when we're talking about the way forward, and if students didn't get the results they expected or wanted, what options do they have now? I mean, how should they plan for their future ahead?
I think when we talk about school leavers, the A-level students, they basically need to get those university admissions in the bag. And, so whether it's their first choice university or in some cases not their first choice university, students need to be, unfortunately, they will need to be more flexible, and universities will need to be more flexible. So along with the schools who have to support these students. So they will, everybody, again, unprecedented times, we may not always get what we want. Universities may not always get the students that they had originally made the offers to. So everybody needs flexibility, and that's in the short term. But in the longer term, I think what the government of Pakistan really needs to focus on, and this is sort of my humble opinion, is on actually using the National Testing Service perhaps to have a much more local standardization of ability, and also, even more important than that, improving the intermediate stream, because we are hearing a lot about how expensive Cambridge is. We also know that hundreds of thousands of students are forced to take the Cambridge exam purely because our intermediate standards have fallen so much.
Right.
Even institutions like Kinnaird, where the teaching is brilliant, but teachers are teaching to the test. So they are teaching students deliberately not to question, not to critically analyze material, because they will fail the intermediate exam. So what we really need to do is train the examiners, train the paper markers, improve the quality of the test and of the intermediate exam, so it's not based on guest papers alone. And look at our neighbors. Their CBSE exam is internationally accepted, and the number of students who sit for the Cambridge exam in a country 4 times our size is much less than ours, because they have improved it, and they just did it 20 years ago, not too long ago.
Right. Those points to you are very interesting. Ms. Pervaiz, what are your thoughts on that? That there needs to be a better standard for localized, standardized testing, and we need to work on the intermediate exams. We need to work on local systems a little more in order to have a stronger grip on our education system.
Of course we do. Matriculation system wasn't that, I think in times of our parents, it wasn't really discarded off as something, which is now. And yes, there are other systems, as Ms. Riaz just mentioned about IB and Pearson, and the high school system. So the thing is that we really need to revamp our own intermediate board, our own matriculation curriculum, and it should be recognized internationally. So this is something which cannot be done in 6 months, which cannot be done in isolation. And it has to be done by the educational experts. So this is something, of course, we need to plan for the next 10 years. And it needs to be addressed. I think it's high time. But on the other hand, we really don't need to worry about what other countries are doing in regards with Cambridge International. We need to just plead our case, Pakistan's case, and if you want to narrow it down to Dr. Murad Raas, we just need to put up a case about Punjab and see how can we get the best out of them for our students. So we cannot just generalize everything. We need to come out and come up with specific solutions. And even more so, we need to have some effective discussion with the local universities, with Aga Khan and with the different medical colleges, that how they're going to take this up, because they're already partial towards A-level students. Because I've seen some amazing A-level students who cannot even make it to a decent medical university in Pakistan. So this is something which our locus, we need to start focusing what we can fix at the moment.
Right.
And of course, Cambridge needs to be, they need to be aware of our concerns, which are very genuine at the moment.
Right. Those are all very, very points you put there. Ms. Riaz, I'm just going to put one last question to you, and I know this is a concern for many, many students who have received their grades this year around. And in fact, it's a concern for many students each year, which is taking a gap year after you have completed your A-levels, whether to give exams again or just take some time off. How does that look to universities? Is that recommended? And do you think that's something students should opt for if they do genuinely need a break?
Yes. Generally, UK universities look at gap years very favorably, but those gap years have to be spent doing something constructive. So given the current situation, because of COVID, because opportunities for interaction are limited, at least where I am currently, I'm sort of at the moment, I'm in Dubai, and interestingly, my own daughter is supposed to go to university this year. So because opportunities are limited, I'm encouraging students, if they get into a university of their first, second, even third choice, to go and move on, because we don't really know how COVID is going to pan out, whether students will have the opportunities to do any internships, to do any kind of extracurricular activities as they would have perhaps in previous years. So unless students have a very clear course of action as to how they're going to spend that 1 year and make their application for next year better, and of course repeats those exams, I'm generally advising students not to consider the gap year, because A, there are no guarantees that the exam will happen in November or that they will get an improved grade. B, next year admissions are going to be more competitive because there are going to be more students who have taken the gap year, and there will be, the number of seats at universities will be the same. So if students can get a reasonable choice to start off their academic career, I would suggest take that. We are lucky, we are lucky we're alive, we are lucky we're able to go to university, we're lucky we're able to move on. Many of us around us this year.
Right. Point. I think I'm going to end this segment here. If, unfortunately, students did not get their predicted grades, it is important to keep in mind that there still are many, many great opportunities ahead, and hopefully things will settle down. Hopefully a solution will be reached with the international examination boards, and some sort of middle ground will be found. Thank you so much, Ms. Huma Pervaiz, for joining us from Lahore, Ms. Saima Asghar Riaz for joining us from Dubai. Thank you for watching Indus Special. We will see you again tomorrow with more stories. Till then, goodbye and take care.